Well, Barry Trotz has a plan to get the Nashville Predators back on track, plus comments on the goaltending situation. Is it time for the Predators to make some lineup changes beyond just shuffling the lines? And Andrew Brunette does something interesting at Predators practice one day after some scathing comments about the team's performance. We'll dive into that today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, want to start out with a special hello to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys. We appreciate the support you give us week in, week out. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at the Hockey News.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your purchase. All right, Ann, Nashville Predators, things have not been going too hot for them. 4 straight losses. They are now 5-10, their worst start since the 2003 NHL season. And things, not exactly all sunshine and rainbows in the Smashville universe right now. Yesterday, Barry Trotz hopped on 1025 The Game with some guy. You guys can probably figure out who, but just some guy.
Loud talker. He's a loud talker.
Yeah. Kind of talking about where the team is at, maybe plans to get into it, and some interesting tidbits there, Ann.
Yeah, I really thought it was an interesting conversation with Barry Trotz. And this is somebody you have to remember who is so passionate and so invested in this team getting wins. So it was helpful, I think, to hear his big perspective, because in the moments after those losses, when you're in a streak where you've lost 4 in a row, sometimes you kind of need somebody to help you navigate through the weeds. And I thought Barry Trotz had a good, even keeled perspective on it. Obviously frustrated, said, look, this is a team that's finding ways to lose games. So frustrated with the mistakes, but also understanding and kind of big picture. Like, we knew that this was going to be a little bit of a challenge. I don't think these are the challenges necessarily that Barry Trotz thought was going to lead to the losses, that was going to be a step back in this reset. But he talked about a lot of things. He talked about goaltending. He talked about what he's looking for from these players, these younger players especially, and talked about what he's missing, from some of the veteran players. So I thought it was a really great conversation from Trotz. I think it's a good cleanse the palate, big picture conversation that Barry Trotz had with us. We all needed to be sat down by Trotzy and told, hey, let's check in.
Yeah, we've been critical of the goaltending the past little bit, and that was one of the topics that Barry Trotz talked yesterday too.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting because everybody, look, there's nobody in Nashville who doesn't know exactly who Juuse Saros is. There's nobody in Nashville that's questioning whether Juuse Saros is one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. He is. Has he had his best games recently? No, he hasn't. I thought Trotz had some interesting perspective on that. He said, we know who he is. We know what we have in him. This is not something that we're concerned is going to be a big problem. He also pointed out how different this season is for Juuse Saros. And it's something that I don't know that I'd really been as cognizant of as you watch Saros give up some of these goals. But Saros is used to playing in front of a team that gives up 35 shots a game. Let's face it. He has been in games where he has faced 60 shots in a game. So he's used to playing behind a team, in front of a team, in the goal for a team, where he is constantly facing offensive pressure. That's not this team this year. This is a different year for Juuse Saros too. So, I'm like, let's give Juuse Saros some space to adjust to some changes as well.
Well, the good news is the defense has been getting worse the last little bit. So, hey, maybe
Couple
we'll see
extras.
more. Maybe we'll see more 43 saves on 45 shots performances from Juuse Saros coming up here shortly. I mean, I'm curious what your take on that, Ann, is, because it's weird because, it's, oh, well, this is a person that's been accustomed to, getting all this work during the game and, 40 seconds. And I get it. Like it is a change in flow when suddenly you're only having to make like 2 saves every minute or,
Right.
save every minute as opposed to, just constant pressure on your end and diving left and diving right. And there's a shot attempt and there's a shot attempt. But it's also at the same time, like as a goaltender, like, isn't that what you want at the beginning of the season? Like, shouldn't that be like kind of easing you in? Like, shouldn't it, like, wouldn't it just be sort of, I guess, better to kind of, just sort of face regular pressure as it is to jump right in and, have to face like, 30, 40, 50 shots from other teams at the beginning of the season. It seems like what the Predators were doing would have been easier for somebody in Saros' situation.
You would think that it would be easier, like, hey, less volume, got to be an easier gig for you. But I do think that the way that the Predators play overall also adjusts the types of shots that Saros is seeing. Now, look, I am not here saying that there aren't goals that Saros should have made some saves on over these last 4 games. I think that, we can all say there's a couple ones that he probably wants back. I also think the types of shots that he has seen in the last 4 games are, hey, all of a sudden there's a guy in the slot with the puck and there's not a defender to be had. So
not all his fault the past few games.
Yeah,
yes.
not all his. So he's seeing, with the style of play that the Predators are playing, I wonder if he is seeing more of those odd man rushes, more of those maybe turnovers where very quickly there's a guy in a high danger area with the puck. But I also think that Saros is not an ease in kind of guy when it comes to in-game play. Like, Barry Trotz pointed out in the Anaheim game, I think that Saros faced 10 shots in 40 minutes. That's a whole different mental game that you play as a goaltender. You play that game differently from a mental perspective than he does a game against the Carolina Hurricanes with 60 plus shots. So I think that there's an adjustment here for Saros in goal as far as just the mental game and the pace of the game and the types of shots that he is seeing because of the change in system from the Predators and just from the mistakes that the team has been making over the last 4 games. So I really don't think there's anybody legit in Nashville that's like, oh, Saros, man, he's on the downhill of his career. I don't think anybody thinks that, but I thought it was interesting for Trotz to point out, like, look, this is a different looking game right now for Saros. So let's give him some time to adjust.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair too.
Yeah. There's no panic.
It just seems like it should be. Yeah. The other interesting thing was Barry Trotz's plan to kind of get the Predators back on track. Which is him saying, he said this on 102.5 yesterday. Basically, we get 4 points in every 3 games, and we're like back on track. We're back where we think we need to be. So basically, that is either 2 wins every 3 games, which is asking a lot of this team, or it's more like couple overtime losses here and there, a win here and there. What do you think, Ann, when you look at this next little stretch? Is that sustainable?
What's interesting? I think it really depends on when you think it's going to kick in. If you had asked me at the beginning of October, I would have been like, sweet Barry Trotz, we need to have a conversation about the games coming up. But now, between now and Thanksgiving, we have Chicago, we have Arizona, or not Arizona, we have the Avalanche, and we have Calgary. Now, the Predators could beat Chicago. I said could. Y'all heard me. I said could. Yeah. I think that the Predators, if they play a better game, could beat Calgary. The Avalanche putting 8 up last night makes me feel a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. Hey, they've given up. They've given up 7 here recently. So
that's true. So let's see what happens there. You look at the next stretch. You've got St. Louis, the Jets, and Pittsburgh. Could the Predators come up with 4 points there? I think that one. I think you could beat Pittsburgh. The Blues are surprising some people, and the Jets. Let's see. It's really hard to gauge what the Predators can do against the Jets because we really still haven't seen what the Predators can do against the Jets. I don't know. And then you're looking at Minnesota, the Rangers, and Buffalo. I think you could get 4 points out of that. So I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, but I think the Predators have some things that they really need to clean up and address. If this plan of, hey, 4 points every 3 games gets us back in the mix in the Central, great idea. Let's execute it on the ice.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the Preds can do these next little bit. The other question, Anne, is do the Preds need to make some lineup changes? And we're not talking about just reshuffling the lines. We're talking about maybe changing some personnel, some new blood from Milwaukee or someplace else. Let's dive into that in just 1 second. But first, I want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. I'm sure a lot of you guys have had frustrating experiences trying to buy concerts to sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, theater. Maybe you're in an unfamiliar venue and you're not really sure where your seats are. You don't know if the views are good. You don't know if there's a giant pole in the middle of your sight line. Then there's the whole thing with fees. You're not sure if what you're paying is actually going to be a good deal. Maybe there's like hundreds of dollars in fees just piled up. All of that can be stressful. Game Time wants to help taking the ticket buying process and make it less stressful. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. They have all-in prices that show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. And the best part is you can buy tickets in just a matter of seconds with just 2 taps of your phone, and they go straight to your phone, so you don't have to dig through the email every time you're trying to get into a event with crowds of angry people lining up for you. Nope, they're on your phone, ready to go. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Ann, we are talking about the Nashville Predators' struggles here recently, and something that a lot of people have brought up here recently is just whether the Predators need some new blood on the team. Now, the precipice of this is, the Predators, they've made lineup changes. Like we've seen, Yakov Trenin, healthy scratch, but then come back. And Juuse Saros, moving in different spots, healthy scratch back in the lineup. Phil Tomasino rotating in and out. Michael McCarron rotating in and out. Just a lot of, the same pieces, but moving in different spots. Andrew Brunette has called it, wanting to get a look at everybody. But I kind of said this yesterday, and it feels like a little bit of just reshuffling the chairs on your deck when your walls are in need, when your walls are covered in like termite dust and the foundation is crumbling. Do the Predators need to maybe reshuffle the players who are on the roster, not just the players who are in and out of the lineup every night?
I think there's some merit to exploring this for a couple of reasons. One, Andrew Brunette is still learning these players, but I think you're getting enough information at this point where it might make sense to change who you're putting with whom, or whom is with who, or whatever the English of all of that sentence is.
It's sounding good to me.
I think it's interesting to maybe make some changes. There's a couple of players, and you and I have talked about this. There's a couple of players that have rotated opposite in and out of the lineup. that you and I are like, put them together for the love of all that's holy, put them together statistically. So I do think that there's an opportunity here. I also think there is a hitch in the giddy up because you brought in Sam Fagemo, you brought in Liam Foudy, and that took some time away from seeing some of these quote unquote regulars. So it feels like we're still a little bit behind in understanding what we have in the lineup because of that, where maybe the Nashville Predators don't quite know the pieces and how they fit together the best yet.
Yeah. And it's interesting that one thing that Liam Foudy had, because we mentioned him as some new blood, was time and some consistency.
True.
He came into the lineup, at the end of October, and correct me if I'm wrong, Anne, or whoever's listening to this, but I can't remember a game where he was out.
I don't think
after coming in. And you know what? He's been a consistent piece. Like, he has been a very good, bottom six player. Always has some energy. Has been used kind of sparingly in special team moments here and there, but he's got some good chemistry with a couple of guys. He's made some good plays. Hasn't really made, other than, I can remember some rough outings in his first couple games, but since then, I haven't really remembered him making a ton of big mistakes. And the reason why we just mentioned, he's been in the lineup every night. He's getting, we talked about, Juuse Saros and getting the flow of the game going earlier in the show. And in terms of, wanting to get used to the game flow, since he's been called up, he's been in the same spot in the same line, on the same spot in the depth chart. Had roughly the same minutes every night, kind of fluctuates between 9, 10 to 12, 13, somewhere in there, playing the same role, and he's fitting in. Yeah. And that's what comes to mind when I think of Liam Foudy kind of getting under him and adapting this team, is he's had that consistency. And I know Andrew Brunette wants some looks at people, but you're not giving people like Phil Tomasino consistent minutes in any certain spot. You're not giving, bless him, Michael McCarron consistent time in any spot. Juuse Saros has not played well, but you've also moved him, up and down the lineup and kind of changed his role depending on where he's gone. That's part of the reason. I get it. But the thing for Andrew Brunette is, if you're struggling to find motivation to keep the same players in the lineup every night, if you're not if you're I think that's Tomasino is okay, but I would kind of like to look at Michael McCarron in that role now. If you're doing that, isn't that just a sign? It's okay, you don't feel comfortable about having this player on your 23-man roster in the lineup every night? Wouldn't that mean you should probably see if there's somebody else that can fill that role better? Maybe somebody in Milwaukee?
Yeah. I mean, I really can see that. If you're still unsure, maybe there's somebody out there. And look, Nashville has there's a pool to draw from. There are some players in Milwaukee that would love a chance to come up here and see how they fit in. I think with Foudy, the thing that works really well in his favor is that he has the thing the Preds want most, and that's speed. And you've seen some of that. But also what you haven't seen is that big breakthrough play with that speed. You know what I'm saying? Yes, I get he has what you want, but we haven't seen him do with it what we want to see from him. You mentioned Michael McCarron and Phil Tomasino, and shout out to you for this statistic that absolutely rocked my world. And you'll have to lay it out right, because I won't remember it. But why the two of them are opposite, one in the lineup, one out of the lineup, when you could put them both together. I would love to see Tomasino and McCarron get some reps together on a line in some games consistently, and then let's see what Tomasino can do. Because what was the stat that you had Phil Tomasino is like sunshine and rainbows with Michael McCarron.
Basically, it is. I compared the on ice numbers when Tomasino is with McCarron versus Tomasino with everybody else, and it's like night and day difference.
Yes.
Like the defense is way better, the possession is way over. The offense dips like a little bit, like 0.2 goals per 60 minutes, which isn't huge, but the defense is like a goal. The defense allowed is like a goal expected, like one expected goal fewer per 60 minutes with McCarron, as opposed to like any other teammate, even Philip Forsberg, like even like the best players on the Nashville Predators roster. Tomasino's game goes up, like his value and use goes up when he's with Michael McCarron.
I would love to see the two of them in some games consistently with a third lineman. Give me a Liam Foudy, or something like that. I also think that there are a lot of people who would like to see Igor get a chance. Igor Afanasyev, he's the goal leader right now in Milwaukee. He's got 6 goals. And he had a fantastic postseason with the Admirals last year, came in, had a pretty good camp, didn't make the team. But I do think there are these players that are simmering in Milwaukee that people are like, look, if you're not sold on some of the guys you have, bring in somebody else and try him out. You might be sold on him. So it's going to be interesting to see how much movement Andrew Brunette makes in the next couple of weeks on things like this.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there's a lot of people that you would want to see you called up from Milwaukee, like somebody like Joachim Kamel, like somebody like Fedor Svechkov, maybe, who haven't necessarily been as consistent as you would like them. But I mean, they're still both young and still got a season ahead of them. But it's interesting. It's if Trotz goes for them and just says like, okay, we need some high-end pieces, like maybe some future pieces in this lineup to see what we have. Or if he goes, maybe somebody like Denis Gurianov, who's got 10 points in 10 games for the Admirals this season. Jankowski having another good season. Really thought maybe we're going to see one of those guys when Novak went down, but they called up Stastny instead. So
interesting.
Possibly also maybe some additional bang ups on that decor. We know Fabro missed a couple of practices, but it's going to be interesting to see what the Predators do moving forward. And you were at practice yesterday and you saw one thing from Andrew Brunette in the way he runs practice that was interesting, considering the soundbite we played from him yesterday after that Predators loss. Let's talk a little bit about that in just 1 second.
First, want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options you can choose from. You can choose spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Tonight, Bengals and Ravens are playing in Thursday Night Football, or Titans fans, if you're feeling confident that Will Levis and Derrick Henry are going to get it done this weekend against the Jaguars, go and check out the odds at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL.
All right, Ann. So after the Anaheim loss on Tuesday, on yesterday's show, we aired a soundbite from Andrew Brunette. He was talking about how he felt like the Predators were having problems stepping up in what he called, critical high-pressure moments. The last, minute of a period, the last, 2-3 minutes of a game. Right after a goal that, either your team scored or the other team scored. And he talked about how he wasn't thrilled with the Predators' performance in those sort of high pressure, step it up or screw everything up situations. Yesterday at practice, it was very competition based.
Yes.
And I noticed that where it's very team on team based, and there's like, a couple of like, team oriented drills and stuff. But how we do like the red or the gold blue shootout at the end of a lot of practices where the gold players take on the blue players in shootouts. There was a twist that Andy Brunette added here. And I'm not 100% if I've seen this before, at least while Brunette's been coaching. But basically, it was like a high stakes version of that, where if like you're on the blue team and you scored a shootout goal, the yellow team has to go out, or the gold team. Sorry, color purist. The gold team goes out and has to do like sprints, like almost like suicide sprints, back and forth from one end of the ice to the other. If you're the blue team and you miss your shootout attempt, or like the goalie saves it, then you and your team have to do those sprints. And it happened after every shootout attempt. And it's interesting because it's like, oh, if you're that blue player, like, you make this, everybody in your team is cheering, the other team has to go do the sprints. If you miss it, boy, you're making the rest of your team tired. You look like an idiot in front of your team. Like kind of one of those like high pressure situations. And it's interesting that Andrew Brunette kind of adds a competitive layer. Like, it wasn't like a Herb Brooks kind of sprinting or anything. Like, you could definitely tell like the players were having fun with it.
Right.
Vocal when their guy missed or made. Brunette was laughing and, kind of chirping some of the players. But it's interesting that competition and kind of high pressure stakes like these, like, you make it, you do good for your team, you miss it, you screw over your team.
Right.
Those kind of stakes come into practice a day after those comments.
Yes. And here is the one thing that I will tell you that I've noticed about Andrew Brunette. Andrew Brunette wastes nothing. He wastes nothing, especially when it comes to practice after a game. And he created these high competitive, high pressure, it's all on you situations. And then the coaches went through and picked who was taking the shots. And it was interesting who was taking the shots. It wasn't Philip Forsberg taking the shootout shot. It wasn't Roman Josi taking the shootout shot. It was Yakov Trenin. It was Michael McCarron. It was Liam Foudy in these high pressure situations. And like you said, there was a lot of joy in this drill as they were doing it, but there was also a price to pay if you didn't execute under pressure. And Andrew Brunette is so intentional about what he does with practices. There was a game several weeks ago where he felt like the team just did not move their feet well. Guess what they did for most of practice? They skated. They didn't need their sticks. There were no pucks in sight. Those boys skated. So Andrew Brunette is taking this thing that he sees the team struggling with, and it's something Barry Trotz mentioned yesterday as well, performance under pressure. And he creates these scenarios. And like you said, this was all in good fun, like so much great energy, but also a little bit of that adrenaline, a little bit of that pressure that these guys have to have and have to be able to operate under in a game. So Andrew Brunette, really smart about what he does. And we asked him afterward, like, hey, kind of a fun way to wrap up practice. And they did another team drill, which is insane. They do a 3-on-2, 2-on-3, quarter sheet of ice, two teams at the same time drill. It's hard to explain. I need a whiteboard, but it's the same thing. It's create pressure, and there's a winning team and there's a losing team. And if you think these guys don't care about winning or losing a drill, you have not met them because they do. And he talks about, like, look, you put them in these situations. It's also about having some fun and realizing that practices can get monotonous, but he wastes nothing in practice. And kudos to him, because I think he's doing a really great job of addressing issues early in practice, some of the things that they need to clean up, but also you've got to be able to do it under pressure. And I think there's some players that need practice at that.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned it. It's like high pressure situations. It's practicing stepping up, but it's also, light. So it doesn't feel like practices are, tense or scary.
Right.
It just kind of helps maybe translate that experience to fun on the ice, like not having to be nervous at those moments during games.
Right.
It reminds me of, a lot of, I worked for a college football team for a while, and we did, and I know a lot of schools do this, but it's, they something called like the last field goal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, if the kicker makes it, practice is over. If the kicker misses it, then, the team does like one more round of like sprints or something like that to close practice. And it's not just, the kicker doing that, but it's, they have to have all the team like kind of surround him, like get really close and like start screaming. There's music blaring, just basically adding the chaos. But it's like kind of in a fun way because like, they're like chirping and stuff like that. And, like if the kicker makes it, then it's just basically like a dog pile and everybody's cheering and everything.
Right.
But it was just kind of like a fun way to add to that. Okay, like you're going to see a situation like this and everybody's mad at you. Like you're going to see a situation where you're going on the road to the other team and it's loud and, the fans really don't want you to make it. This like kind of fun thing is going to like help you lighten the mood when you do that. And that's what it feels like these drills are for the Nashville Predators. So we'll have to see if it works. Again, critical stretch coming up. They have the Chicago Blackhawks Saturday afternoon. We'll talk about what we're going to see from Connor Bedard on tomorrow's show. Anne, where can people find your work? You can find my work online at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find me at PenaltyBoxRadio.com or _NS Morgan on X. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode. We'll see you there.